All right, on this episode of Bouks Talking Bouts, happy to be speaking with an individual who does fighter and media relations for Rise Fighting and also does commentary for them, and going to recap a great card we're just coming off of here. I'm talking to Darcy Mcbride. How's your day going so far there, Darcy?
You know, I've been recharging a little bit after what was an absolutely electric Saturday night and a really long week leading up. And so I've kind of been scouring social media and going over my own thoughts. And first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for giving us the time and the platform to recap the event. But if you were in attendance Saturday night in Victoria or watching on Fight TV, I just want to thank you guys for your support of what was an amazing, amazing event. And all 14 guys really put on a show.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a pretty heavy hand in the organization, but coming off of like your tenure with Battlefield Fight League and being on the microphone for them from the jump and everything like that. When did the dialogue come for you to become a part of Rise FC as the president of media relations?
Yeah, so a long time ago, right around when I first got started, actually, in the media game, I started to realize that I was hosting radio for Bell Media, and I was realizing I have all these contacts of all these athletes and managers and all these promoters and different people in the industry. Why am I not being the plug or the patch cord between them? And so I actually managed Saba Fadai, among other fighters, going back to about 2011, 2012 time, and including his running the MFC and through a lot of that time of his career. And so I've had the dialogue with Saba open for years just as friends. Now, when I did decide to depart from the other organization, it was just mostly because of creative differences. I mean, I owe them a lot in terms of giving me chances to hone my craft and my skill. I did go to school for broadcast performing arts, and I just felt like I had a little more to offer to the overall broadcast and the pay-per-view, which is what I am able to do now with Rise. And so when those creative differences kind of came to a head, and there's a couple of other behind-the-curtain things that happened that is totally way too irrelevant for me to look in my rearview mirror and talk about this far ahead. It just made more sense for me to look for another opportunity or to close the door entirely on MMA media and just focus on some of my other talents that I kind of used to pay the bills. So hollered at Saba Fadai and said, hey, listen, man, if you're interested, I'm now available for work, and here's the kind of the stipulations of what I'm looking for, and I don't know what you're looking for. And he just kind of said, hey, man, cut it. You don't even have to explain yourself anymore. I need you to do this, that, and this. You're hired immediately. Let's work out something that works for you financially. And we've been off to the races ever since about early December, just before we started setting up Rise FC 3 in Chilliwack there, and put together a solid card for that. And it just felt like the right fit. So we're full steam ahead now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, been doing multiple events with Rise now. Was there anything you learned from, say, Rise FC 3 that you were able to use for Rise FC 4, whereby the show just became that much better and it was that much more comprehensive of a production? Like, what's the learning curve between shows?
Insane right now, because while we have a bunch of people who have been in the game for a while, myself, Saba Fadai included, this is a whole new venture. So anytime you're taking something and trying to either remodel, remold, or reinvent it, you're going to have a big learning curve, which we have had. In my opinion, when you say you've stopped learning, I think you become closed-minded. So no matter how many shows I'm into, which is probably in the 60s now, if I'm being casually counting them, I learn every show. I'm still learning. I went to school to do this almost a decade ago, and there's no doubt in my mind that Saturday I probably learned more about behind-the-scenes, pay-per-view, audio, video-related screw-ups and fixes than I've ever learned in a single night. So the one thing I really learned Saturday is that athletes come to Rise FC, they get in the cage, they see the size of it, the quality of it, and they are inspired to put on the best performance ever that they are able to do. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I've watched all 14 of these guys compete before in the past, and I felt like the posts they were putting up in the morning, just jumped around in the Rise FC cage, just got to move. They all mentioned that quality and that professional look of the cage itself. And, from the guys showing up in their hotel rooms with Saba having an itinerary and Pedialyte set in their individual rooms, personally addressed to them. We're learning how to really take my angle of knowing the media and TV game and Saba's angle of being a former athlete himself, and still currently training and doing all that. He knows what it's like to show up in a city you're not from, and it can be very difficult, or it can be very hospitality driven, and we're going with the latter on that. So what we've learned from our last show to this one is that there's definitely a big learning curve going away from your hometown and your comfort zone, as coming to the island illustrated a few new challenges. I'm born and raised here, so I understand it, but I'm going to say that I didn't really put it all into my thought process when it came to renting certain pieces of equipment or having certain advantages that you have on the mainland that are just not available. So I feel like we're constantly learning, and I feel like what we learned from 3 to 4 is going to make 5 back in Chilliwack on September 7th. Just another step in the right direction, and maybe by 10 we've got this thing really hammered out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of wanted to dig into the card a little bit here. I mean, Tristan Connolly defeating Dewan Owens, and just a really emphatic sort of dramatic performance as well. I mean, coming in the final round there and just asserting himself as the lightweight champion. And there's a lot of dialogue surrounding Tristan Connolly maybe getting some UFC looks, perhaps for that upcoming Vancouver card. What were your thoughts on that bout in particular, and also for Connolly's future?
As I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm looking down at my MacBook that I haven't opened since then, and I'm pretty sure I've got Tristan Connolly's DNA all over my keyboard. That was a fight. Let's see, man. You mentioned my tenure beforehand with being on the mic for another organization. We're at 800 plus fights that I've called. That one was literally the most exciting fight and the most, anticipatingly up, down, all around. I had a 2-2 going into the 5th round on my very unofficial scorecard, and Tristan Connolly let out a scream after that 4th round before the 5th round started that was so primal in nature, and I just thought, okay, he's either going out on the shield or he's going out to finish the fight. There's no decision happening here. And for Dewan Owens to come up from North Carolina and be in the most absolutely top-notch shape you can be in as a fighter. I mean, we had him out against Saba Fadai last time, and both guys were at 165, being that it was a short notice fight. There was no pound allowance here. It was at lightweight. It was 155 pounds. Dewan Owens showed up as a professional, made the weight easy. Same with Tristan Connolly. And in my opinion, they put on what would be the best fight, outside the UFC in Canada this year. And we still got half a year to go, but the challenge is out there. Tristan Connolly is the number 1 ranked 155 pounder in this country outside the UFC. There are several websites that agree with me this morning, but I don't need their agreement to know that in my heart. Tristan's a guy who's been 9 years in the game as a professional, never had an amateur career. All 13 wins for Tristan Connolly have come inside the bell. The man does not need judges when he's on the right side of it. And in fairness, the fights that he's gone down in, especially the last one with Shane Campbell, was like a 4-round absolute war out in Alberta, and he got caught in a knee bar. So he's exciting every time out, and lately has been just a formidable force to try and deal with. Now, if he is not next in line for a shot in the UFC, and obviously it won't happen September 14th, because if you didn't notice, it looked like he got hit by a Mack truck, and that Mack truck was named Dewan Owens. Dewan did some work on Tristan Connolly's, eye and nose area, and really put in a performance that, if he would have came out in that 5th and done a little more work and damage in the first few minutes than Tristan was able to, you could have seen the fight stop the other way too, just on blood and optics. But in a very long-winded way, I'm going to just say that was the best fight I've had the privilege of sitting, 8 inches away from the cage and calling. And a massive congratulations to Dewan Owens on being in shape, coming up, and having a great performance, albeit not the result. And just all kinds of respect and congratulations to not only an athlete, but a good friend of mine in Tristan Connolly for really cementing his status as the top dog in Canada right now.
Yeah, it seemed to be that mutual respect too. I mean, Connolly talking about how much of a gamer Dewan is and everything like that, and how he persevered through some tough spots. And yeah, 8 in his last 9 tries, so looking pretty good on that front. But, just a stacked card in general. I mean, we're looking at the welterweight title fight as well. What were your thoughts on the co-main event feature? I mean, pretty dramatic though, with the, later on finish as well in the bout. And yeah, just kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that, wrapping up in the 4th round, and we got a new Rise FC welterweight champion.
It was mind-blowing. Just before I move on, I want to say that post-fight, after that fight ended, and Dewan Owens came and sat directly in front of our broadcast booth, and Tristan came over and sat in front of him, and they were speaking to each other. And it was just a surreal moment to look around, and there were cameras on every side of everywhere capturing that moment. And that's something that most people don't see in the mixed martial arts world, is that first minute or two after the fight ends and the adrenaline is still pumping so high. So I just want to also thank them for their sportsmanship and their level of professionalism. And that rolls right into the co-main event, where we had Nikolai Curry taking on Saeed Mirzai. our welterweight division goes at 175 pounds, which I believe will be the eventual weight class anyway, given maybe another 6 or 8 months, and Uncle Dana there is going to probably have it in place. But we had a fallout of an opponent for Nikolai Curry, and at that point, Saeed only having 2 pro fights and Nikolai being a veteran of 15, I didn't know that, it would be something that would be allowed to go, because obviously the commission has final call and final standing regardless if you accept the fight as a coach or a camp. So we were very intrigued when the commission said they had no issue. Now, the reason for that is Saeed has a 15-3 amateur record that includes a pair of world IMMAF world titles at the amateur level. So it's not as though the man's only been in 2 fights inside of a cage in his life. He showed that on Saturday night. He came out and was manhandled in the first round by a very strong Nikolai Curry. This is a dude who, he doesn't miss the weight room, but he also doesn't miss the jiu-jitsu and the judo mats either, because he was using trips to the outside of the leg nearest to him, the lead foot with a push on the shoulder, something that we very rarely see in MMA. And it had Saeed's balance and kind of his whole process kind of messed up, and ended up getting his back taken in that first round. And you could see the strength difference off the bat, but it was in that second round, later in it, I believe, when Saeed was able to land a strong left straight along the cage and actually opened up a pretty serious cut above the head of, or on top of the head of Nikolai Curry, and you've seen the bout start to sway, and Nikolai started to get a little bit more tired, and the third round came out, and if my mind's correct, I believe Nikolai took that round as well on the grappling end and really had a few close exchanges, had a close armbar that was saved by the bell. But in the fourth round, upon trading those trips and shots again, throwing that low right trip kick, Saeed was able to slip a quick left hand out in place of it and was able to secure the knockout and, taking the belt in the process. And it just built up all night. And I know we're working our way back down the card, but you're going to hear me give similar reviews to a lot of these fights, because they both showed up and put exactly what we asked for them on the line, which was a championship performance. Nikolai Curry is a veteran. If you look at that guy's resume, he's fought some legit guys, the likes of Roger Bowling, just to pull one name out of the hat. And for Saeed to come out and pick up a victory, to pick up 18 odd minutes of cage time, something he's never done before, because even as an amateur, 5 rounds is only 15 minutes. So he was in uncharted waters, and with the motivation of his son, being overseas in Germany and not able to be seeing him on the regular, he came out and put on the performance so far of his career, a career that's very young and is only beginning to blossom.
Yeah, for sure. And we talk about career quality performances. I think a similar sentiment could probably be extended to Jamie Siraj, that emphatic first round knockout via slam over Blake Sigvaldason. A lot of pundits going into that fight were talking about how this could really flesh out the hierarchy for the 135 pounders in Canada, and just, an emphatic finish in relatively short order. So what were your thoughts on Jamie Siraj's dominant victory there inside of 37 seconds?
Yeah, I know both these guys from the come up way back. I know Blake from his amateur days, as well as Jamie starting off as a 15-year-old in the Vancouver scene. So for these two to be on the card facing each other, it felt like graduation for me. It felt like both these guys have gotten to this level, and Blake Sigvaldason joining Toshido here lately, coming off 3 finishes, picking up a title in another organization. I mean, he's been on an absolute tear. Jamie, for his own credit, did the same thing, picked up a title in Alberta, a fight he was brought in to lose, didn't quite go as they planned for. Jamie came back out and put on a masterful performance against Gabe Sagman. We matched these two guys up with a shot 3-1 versus 7-2. Whoever wins this fight is going to be in that top level at 135. And Jamie came out after doing some new wrestling training, I guess is what he accredited to. And after a quick exchange along the cage, Blake was securing a takedown, and Jamie was able to get a quick reversal. And only because it's this move will I reference the WWF, but it was almost a rock bottom style takedown and slam. And it was Blake's head bouncing off the canvas really hard. And I mean, that's all legal in this game that we play, but it's not something you can really train for. So it's not exactly like you have a quick return or a quick defense for that. And upon landing there, Jamie was quickly able to move into a mounted crucifix position and throw about 2 more shots before, I can't off the top of my head remember who was in the cage ref and if it was Mitch or John, but they broke the action up there, and you could see the actual, state that Blake was in of having his head fall and hit hard. So full credit to Jamie Siraj. He came out and put on, like you said, performance of a career potentially, 37 seconds over a ranked fighter, with plenty over 500 record coming out of a gym like David Lee's. So it's it's enough to put him in the show. September 14th is not full, and Sean Shelby, Dana White, Mick Maynard, if any of you guys have the ability to hear my voice today, it is that you should have Jamie Siraj in the organization fighting in Vancouver. Not only is he going to help sell the place out, but more importantly than that, his talent belongs and deserves to be at that level. So for the Gremlin, I was ecstatically happy for him. I know Blake will bounce back. We look forward to having him back out, and I don't think that derails his train at all. But you can say that Jamie's has now made it to the station waiting for that next step.
Absolutely, I agree with that sentiment. You mentioned the rock bottom in there, which kind of got me thinking about the people's elbow a little bit, but maybe we should be talking about the people's punch. I mean, that left hand from Josh Kwiatkowski. I mean, 16 seconds, that big knockout win over Grant Gorsigner. So what were your thoughts on that particular bout and just how that all wrapped up?
Hey, full credit to Grant Gorsigner, first of all, for making his pro debut against a dude who lives in the gym, and Josh Kwiatkowski. Josh also, was an extra hungry dog on this one, because he had his fight pulled from him just a month and a bit ago out in Saskatoon. There, unfortunately, the opponent couldn't come to the table with his medicals properly or something to that effect, and so he had his fight last minute canceled. So he was already looking to bounce back after a great fight with George Alcala at our last event. And it was a split decision loss, so it wasn't as great for him as it was for George, albeit for me as a commentator, it was, my time of my life that night. It was the fight of the night, no doubt about it. However, fight of the night doesn't always mean a win, and for Josh Kwiatkowski, he needed that victory to get back to 500, and that's just what he did. He's, recently changed over to be working with Tristan Connolly at Checkmat Vancouver, and I know he's been out with the Revolution guys as well out in Langley, and it was a big night for them. Jamie Siraj, Tristan Connolly, and of course Josh Kwiatkowski, all part of that same kind of collection of teammates, and he showed that, back at 500, he needs another matchup September 7th. This guy likes to stay busy. We can look for him to be in action. If you're listening and you want a piece of Josh Kwiatkowski, you can message me right now, and we can see about getting that work, because I know he's open to fighting some of the guys that are out to fight him. He doesn't want a fight that's not going to be exciting, whether it's win, lose, or draw. So shouts out to the Juggernaut. Josh, he held himself like a pro that night, did a great job, and on Grant's note, he is healthy. Spent the day the next day in Vancouver with his wife and daughter. And, I'm excited to see what the future has for him bouncing back, and thanking him for coming up north of the border.
Yeah, for sure, and also a couple of impressive pro debut wins there for sure. I mean, with Bryce getting the victory there, but also Keenan getting the W in that one. What were your thoughts on some of the earlier bouts in the evening? Were there some debutante fighters or fighters who were early on in their career that really made that big impression on you? I mean, the opening fight as well between Walter Barrios and Mitch Struzella was a great one as well. 3-round slugfest. Out of the 3 performances there, what were your thoughts on all of those respective bouts?
Well, for a certain reason, I'm going to leave the Jaden Martin-Bryce Goujon fight to last to analyze, and it's because I want to make a pretty stern and honest point about how that fight went in comparison to some things we've seen in combat sports lately. So I'm going to leave that one for a second and let it marinate. Let's start at Mitch Struzella, Walter Barrios, the only Victoria versus Victoria fight on the card, okay? Both these guys, amateurs 135, they could both be fighting pro ranks. For whatever reason they haven't chosen, I'm not sure if it's a lifestyle or a job-related issue or a reason or whatever it is. These guys came out, stood in the center of the cage or along the cage, and traded leather for 9 minutes, and it was exactly what our show needed to kick it off, and that's exactly why we wanted to have them on the card. We lost a couple of amateur bouts, the week leading up to the fights, and while that was super unfortunate, I was very, very happy that Walter Barrios and Mitch Struzella both made it to fight time, and Mitch put on a show with his boxing. Walter's defense and his ability to move and then catch on the return, and I mean, non-stop action for 9 minutes. I just praise both of those guys for coming in and making the show start on such a high level that we were able to carry on into, and we carried right on into James Foster versus Keenan Keller, and Keenan Keller, as you mentioned, making his pro debut at a Titan MMA. Teammate and roommate of Micah Brakefield, who, if you know anything about Micah, a tall glass of water, long reach, very awkward to fight, and Keenan is basically the same model, just, I guess the new version, not that Micah's an old man, sorry, Micah. It's one of those things where you saw him come out and put on his game a little bit against James in the first round. However, he got caught with a very clean shot from Jungle James Foster, and people might have counted James out before this fight. This is a guy who in pro and amateurs had 18 fights. He's never been stopped via strikes ever. This is a dude that showed up this last weekend about 40 pounds lighter than I saw him in person a month and a bit before. He had done the training to get this fight in order. He did everything he needed to do to be respected on this level. And there were a few people whose names I definitely won't mention because they're not worth my time or my breath, who had things to say about this fight and this matchup very derogatorily, like we were out here making something happen that was not a square and a fair fight. James Foster showed up and did exactly what he needed to do and came within a half inch of really spoiling the party for Keenan Keller on Saturday night. Now, having said that real quick, James is 41 years old and set in the cage after he doesn't know where the future is for his fight career as of right now, as he has a family. And I'll tell you right now, I won't put his business in the street, but this guy's won bigger fights in real life than anybody will ever win inside the cage. So I don't give a damn if he fights or not anymore. I just hope that he is happy with his life and everything that's happened for him. I admire him as a professional, respect him as an athlete, and this is one tough, heavy-handed son of a bitch, as Keenan and Micah both pointed out after the fight. So respect to James Foster. Now, real quick on Keenan Keller. This man, I don't know if you saw the pictures of him sitting on the motorbike at Barnes Harley-Davidson where we had our official weigh-ins for Rise FC4, but he had the glasses going, he had the hair pulled back, tarp off. This guy is an absolute chiseled animal of a fighter, and I can't wait to have him back with Rise again to just be able to promote him, let alone watch him fight. He's a beautiful human being, a happy-go-lucky, very positive character who has turned himself into a professional athlete and one hell of a good man in the last 2 years. So shouts out to Keenan Keller on finishing the fight, wearing some adversity in the process, and just being a 10 out of 10 human being, the kind that we're proud to have here at Rise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, had a great performance by all accounts, and definitely, seemed like a character based on what you were talking about with the tarp off and all that. But also in an athletic sense, probably a
in his hand, feeding them to the ring girls behind the motorbike. Like, this dude he's all out, man. He's beautiful. Check out Michael Breakfield's Instagram feed for a little more on that. But anyway, sorry, you were saying?
Oh, yeah, no worries. I was just saying, probably also on an athletic level, difficult frame to deal with, noticing he's around, 6'5" there, so.
Yeah, he's stretched out. He's like Dulcine from Street Fighter. The guy can touch you from across the cage, so it's difficult to have a game plan against someone unless you've got a carbon copy of him in the gym with you. And the only one I really know of is in the gym with him and Micah Breakfield for size and comparison. So difficult matchup for sure. Now, you mentioned Jaden Martin and Bryce Goujon, and Bryce coming out and getting the first victory of his career after coming up short against Josh McKenzie at Rise FC3. And unfortunately for Jaden Martin, losing in his debut, albeit by injury. And I want to clear up a couple of things, but I also want to speak on something martial arts related. First of all, the fight was not stopped by the official. The fight was stopped by Chris Franco in the corner of Jaden Martin. Chris and Jaden are more than coach and athlete. They are business partners. They run Franco's Kickboxing and Pancration in unison together. This is family right here. And as the end of the first round came, Jaden Martin threw a spinning hook kick, I believe it was, and he felt the right knee really kind of twist out and pop. And upon the end of that round happening, I got the champ Tristan Connolly calling me. I'm going to send him a voicemail. He won't like that much. He's too far away to hit me or touch me, so I'm safe for now. The fact that he went in and spoke to Chris Franco and said, "Hey, listen, coach, my knee, there's something wrong with it." And he said, "Okay, do you want me to stop the fight?" And Jaden said, "No, I'm just going to switch the game plan up." And after a first round that he had won on the scorecards easily and in perception, he had dropped Bryce in the opening seconds of that fight and was really working his kind of stoic movement, not a relentless pace, but a very precise and measured pace that is difficult to read. And that second round, you saw things kind of sway. But I'm going to give Bryce some credit here, too, because Bryce came in the best shape I've ever seen Bryce in, and I've been watching him fight since an amateur as well. So he did his work. He was training around the world. He came back into the groove here and really put the force on in round two, got a couple takedowns. Yes, Jaden was compromised on his leg, but this is fist fighting. We're not out there playing cards or chess, so there are physical injuries that can come along with it. And upon that second round, not really going at the way Jaden, I think, was hoping, even on the bad leg. He came out for the third round, and upon backpedaling, Bryce was putting the pressure on him again, kind of fell to pull guard, and Bryce along the cage was throwing some shots in, and Jaden was absorbing some punishment, okay? And Chris Franco said, "That's enough. My fighter's not going to take unintentional, unneeded punishment while he's in a handicapped position with only having one useful leg in a fight." Not only is this honorable beyond measure for him to do that, and then Jaden, while I'm speaking to him in the cage, acknowledge it and thank him for stopping the fight. Do you know how many fighters would thank their coach for stopping a fight when it's based on their safety? I'll tell you the answer. None that I've seen up until Saturday night. Okay? The reason this is pertinent is you guys have been online lately, and yourself and everybody else has seen, the deaths that have happened in boxing lately. Maxim Dadashev was the one fella that passed away here this past weekend, and there was a second one, and I'm going to feel like an asshole if I don't look his name up because I need to owe him that respect. But twice in the last couple weeks, Daniel Aguion, that's what his name is, yeah. So Aguion, Dadashev, two fellas that were taken far, far too early at 24 and 26 years old post-fight in boxing matches. I'm not here to shit on boxing. That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is make some trainers maybe more aware of not giving your fighter the option and instead seeing their future as a family man, as a father, as a human being, and as an athlete and a teacher and a coach and all those things that fighters usually aspire to and end up being, to let the pride go a little bit from seeing your fighter win a fight on one leg, win a fight with, this kind of a debilitating injury. Beyond a broken hand, broken hand ain't going to do you too much. Either you can throw it or you can't. And my boy Justin Kneffley, who recently picked up a title, can be a testament to that as he broke his hand in the second round. His coach, Bill Mahood, said, all right, well, how do you feel? You want to quit? And he's like, no. He's like, cool. In 5 minutes, it's going to numb up. You keep throwing it or you can not. That's the appropriate situation there. When you only have one pillar to stand on, you have an eye injury, you have a serious cut, maybe you've been hit and accumulated. Like they said, Max, you're taking too many shots. Max, you're getting hit too much. Max, you're getting hit. And he just, Buddy McGirt, his trainer, is a long-time trainer in the boxing game, and he ended up collapsing after the match and obviously passed away shortly after. Daniel Aguion was in the cage still after the announcement, and, I watched it last night. It's very troubling video to watch, and this is stuff that I'm not interested in being a part of in mixed martial arts, not even for 1 minute. And for that reason, I commend Chris Franco, and I messaged him and told him, listen, this isn't enough respect, and I'm going to tell you again when I see you in person, but you are the gold standard for how to protect your athlete. And a bunch of fighters aren't going to like that I say this, and I don't care because I love them as people as much or more than fighters, and I would like their coaches to do the same in this instance. Jaden will be back. Jaden will be a champion in whatever he pursues in life, including and not limited to mixed martial arts. And Chris Franco knows that about him and had the foresight to step in and do the right thing before we all become a headline and a reason that MMA is even that much harder to get behind, push, and treat as a legitimate sport. Having said that, I feel terrible to see two young men lose their lives, and the families of Max Dadashev and Daniel Aguion, I send my condolences and my positive light and love to you guys. And this is something, it just reminds me of Tim Hague. It reminds me of what we saw in Edmonton, going back a little while now. And it's something I don't want to relive when I'm sitting 10 inches next to the cage and I'm calling some of the best athletes in the world doing their jobs. So I won't apologize for being long-winded on that. I'll talk about that issue for as long as somebody will give me the platform for, Dylan. So I don't know how you feel about that, brother, but what's your thoughts?
I thought there were a lot of great insights there, and I totally get what you're saying in that regard as well. I mean, fighter safety is paramount, and we need to get away from this, I guess, like aggro, sort of like go it on your shield warrior perception of things when if you are in fact injured, you got to have that big picture kind of viewpoint, fight for another day, because exactly, we can't be having those tragedies like have recently popped up in boxing. And yeah, exactly, similar sentiment, just, rest in peace to both of those individuals and all condolences to their loved ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very scary. I don't know. It's just terrifying to think that we're going to be in a position where we have a fight end, and the repercussions of that due to whatever kind of irresponsibility is losing the life. We can't do that. That's not what we're here to do. And I just, not that Jaden's life was in peril or in jeopardy there with that fight. Hugo Santillan from Argentina. That's not. I'm right in saying Daniel Aguion, but I had him mixed up from a few years ago. He did as well, pass away. But Hugo Santillan from Argentina was the fellow who also lost his life. So I just want to say, coaches and fighters out there, guys that don't fight and that are watching this thing, we don't want you to risk life and limb to win the fight in there. We want you to put your toolbox out and use all of them that you can, but not at that risk and that level. So.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great sentiment, which I think could be a great way to end things off. But I'll put the ball in your court because you've been great with your time. Is there anything you want to add as a parting thought as we're wrapping things up here, Darcy?
Center and Rob Wilson. I want to thank Danica Forsyth. I want to thank Kelly Gilroy, the commissioner from British Columbia Athletic Commission. I want to thank everybody that was involved with coming out to help us put together takedown and move equipment around. Kalar audio video. I want to thank Barnes Harley Davidson, Saba Fadai, and myself. Were very, very pleased with everybody in Victoria that gave us the hospitality that they did. I want to thank all 14 fighters, their coaches, their camps, their families, their friends, people that put ticket money out to come and watch us, people that took the ferry. I want to thank all my island friends and residents that came out and supported us. I want to thank everybody like you, Dylan, that covered our event. There was so many people that wanted to see this succeed, and although I'll be honest, it could have been a little fuller. That was one area that maybe could have been a little better. Everything else at this show was a great showing of what we did here. So if you're not already following us, please do at Rise Fighting on Instagram, Rise FC on Facebook, and www.risefc.ca for tickets to September 7th. Rise FC 5, and we'll have our main event announced very shortly for that. Just waiting on some contracts back. I think you guys are going to be excited for that one in Chilliwack at the Landing Sports Center.
Yeah, you guys are really building on the momentum and everything too. I'm also noticing Rise FC 6 is slated for November 30th as per MMA Empire. But yeah, people should definitely check out Rise FC and keep them on their radar because a lot of great things going on there. But I appreciate the time, Darcy, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day there, man.
Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it too, sir. Thank you very much.